Okay, hello student. I'm very happy to have this opportunity for student. We have Ms. Holly Madill, the director of National Charrette Institute from Michigan State University. I would like to introduce her, and also she's gonna introduce her experience about Charrette. So I introduced the Charrette in my class very briefly, but you will learn more about the cases from her. So let me introduce Ms. Holly Madill from Michigan State.
Hello, everyone. Okay. So there's going to be an echo.
Okay, well, you're fine.
Okay. I'm Holly Madill, the director of the National Charrette Institute at Michigan State University. And welcome to a brief presentation about an example of using a charrette for an applied research project. I come to this from a background in urban planning and project management for many years. Good. So we wanted to talk about adapting this to a research project. And so what I'm going to talk about today is a project that we collaborated on with an interior design faculty member, Linda Nubani. And the design team was a group of students in interior design, landscape architecture, and urban planning. And I think we had some alumni also from the interior design program who assisted on the design team. So it's called Designing Safe Neighborhoods. And I guess what I wanted to talk about before kind of getting into kind of setting this up for you is that Linda Nubani had for many years been working with the city of Lansing, which is, you're staying in the city of Lansing. And so she had worked with a lot of years with the police department on analyzing some of their data to help inform their policing strategies. She is an expert in crime prevention through environmental design. And they were interested, one of the things that they were seeing is no matter how many police that they would put into an area, or if they would increase the police presence, it didn't necessarily translate to lower crime. So they were looking at other things that they could do, and crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED, was one of those things. So, so Linda and I started having conversations about CPTED and about the Charrette process. And we crafted this community engagement process where we went into the community, we gave them the data that, that Linda had been working with, and really wanted them to help solve the problem along with the police department. So what I'm going to be showing you is the presentation that was done on the very last day that documents the work of that charrette. The other background piece of information that you should be aware of is it was not a full charrette in terms of an NCI charrette process, so it was not 4 to 7 days. We crammed this all into 3 days, but we had at least 2 feedback loops, 2.5 feedback loops within those days. How is this doing? Okay so far? So the very first day, it follows the process that we used for that had outlined previously related to the charrette process, where the very first day we had pulling out the vision from the community, and then we had stakeholder meetings, and on the last day we had the presentation with the designs. And so this is that last day's presentation. And so Kyung was present for, I think, all of the public meetings. Yeah. So we had welcome and introductions. This is the part of the presentation where we go back and describe what we're doing and why we're doing it, so that everyone is aware and knows where the decisions came from. So in this case, this neighborhood had a lot of planning efforts over the years. And so we acknowledged those. We had participants then working at tables, talking about SEPTED techniques and placemaking techniques to give the designers a sense for where they wanted to go. And so this is just an example of the different stakeholder groups that we had. Those three, again, we engaged residents, businesses, and other stakeholders, the city, and then MSU as the design team. And so our goal out of the charrette was to develop a plan that identified things that homeowners and landowners could do to reduce crime through SEPTED techniques. And then we did some education around SEPTED and placemaking. And then this is our agenda. So this was in February, and Michigan is not ideal. So when you're thinking about your charrette, you need to be thinking not only about kind of the broad principles and products and who's going to be doing it, but also the very practical things about it's can be very, very cold, very wintry. A lot of times in the winter, Michiganders kind of don't go out a lot. So it's not a great time of year to be hosting a charrette, but it was governed by, we were looking to gather this information to inform a grant proposal. And so we had to work around that time frame. So it was at the end of February. We started on the first day with a public meeting. The Friday we had developing concepts alongside stakeholder meetings. We had another public meeting into Saturday to refine, and then the public meeting on the last day. And the design studio was located in a school in the neighborhood, and it was open every day that we were there. On the very first night, we asked participants, it was in a school, so our studio was in a classroom, but the public meetings were in a big gymnasium. And there were a few hallways connecting the entrances, Sabine, those third places you were talking about. And so we had this long corridor before the gymnasium that we could funnel people through. So we had a few of these activities just on the wall, asking them they came to the registration table. We asked them for what one word or phrase describes this neighborhood now, and then they posted it on the board. We had a member of our design team facilitating that and helping people do that. These were not organized like we did in that activity. They were just scattered all over. We then took that information and made a word cloud for it, and then gave this back in the final presentation and said, here's what we heard from you. When you think about your community now, the things that you talk about are its potential, how it does need work. It's cute, comfortable. You also see unsafe. So to give you a glimpse of what the community thought in that moment. And then we also asked them for, in 20 years, what do you hope the neighborhood could be? And so we did the same exercise. There's a member of the design team working with some participants to get their ideas on the board. And these were the ideas that they came up with for what they wanted the community to be. You'll see safe, inviting, connection, integrated, self-contained, amazing, families. And so that's where the exercise that we did can come in handy for these big concepts that you would start planning around. Because this was a applied research-based charrette, one of the things that Linda wanted to know was where she knew where the crime was happening from the data, but she wanted to hear, does that align with residents' experiences? So we asked them a simple question and exercise. We put them up a map, and we gave them green stickers and we gave them red stickers, and we say, tell us where you feel unsafe, put a red dot on it. Tell us where you feel safe, put a green dot on it. And from that simple exercise, you can see that this area right around here is an area where people don't feel safe. And Linda could cross-check that later with her data to see if that was aligned. And one of the things that we learned is that they didn't align, is that people felt unsafe in places where crime wasn't happening, which is an interesting dilemma. So one of the members of our Charrette team was from the Criminal Justice Department, and was doing some what they call hotspot analysis using 3 different techniques. And so this is the report back to the residents about their perceptions of safety versus where the actual crime was happening. So here, if I'm interpreting this right, you can see, so these are the actual crime hotspots, and then the colored zones are the green ones are the ones where people were actually feeling unsafe. So there is a little bit of overlap, and people were feeling safe in these areas when crime was happening. When you're doing applied research, what we learned from doing this is that we call it data-driven research, where the researcher has all of the data and makes assumptions and conclusions, but it's important to cross-check those with the lived experience of your stakeholders. And without doing that, we wouldn't have known that there's this disconnect. So then Linda gave a presentation about SEPDED, what it was, where it came from, its history, what are the principles that are included in it. And one of the things that we had them participants do was, after the presentation, is to just write down on an index card the environmental features that they thought drove burglaries. And then she could align that with the literature to see if the experiences and perceptions of burglaries lined up with actual data related to what drives burglaries. And so that's the number behind each data point is the number of cards that we got with that on it. And then similarly, we were curious, we asked them before the presentation about SEPDED what their definition was, so that we can compare before and after knowledge. So you can get all kinds of data from a charrette to inform your research. So then we had them participate in a SEPDED visual preference survey. So we had, I think how many pillars of SEPDED? 5 kind of best practices of SEPDED. And we had examples of, a couple of examples of each type of best practice. And we just had people going around the room and putting dots on the ones that they preferred. And that helped inform the Charrette team about the designs and what they wanted to do. And so here's an example of a SEPDED approach for speed bumps. And so we had a pro column, things you like about it, things you don't like about it. In this case, we had people just writing down the pros and cons themselves. You had check marks if it was already there. And then this is what happens after that in the studio with all of them lined up. And we had, oh, that's right, we had Harmony with us too. And she's a planner, a local planner, and she was compiling all of this information into a digital format. So then is this a good pace, Seokhyun? So then after we gave them information about educational information about SEPDED and about placemaking, we asked them to engage in some activities around it. So we had maps of the neighborhood on each of the tables, and we were asking them about, in your community, what kinds of placemaking features would you like to see? And what kind of SEPDED do you think would work in your community? So tables of anywhere from 3 to 8 people. And maybe had 10 to 12 tables. And we gathered all of that information from them. And we learned that there were 7 common kind of elements, placemaking and circulation elements that that were common among the tables. Signage and wayfinding, public seating, programming and engagement, arts and culinary arts, public spaces, landscaping and beautification, and the pedestrian experience. So we took those 7 kind of design principles or elements that we heard from participants, and these were the themes that emerged from them. We decided that we could create an overall neighborhood plan, that we could make connections through an existing trail system, that we could improve the trail system and connect it with a park that is not any relationship to me, but Holly Park. They were interested in seeing designs around a school, around the intersection, and then this one kind of Logan Square is what we here call a strip mall, a low density, high parking area, and then streetscaping within the neighborhoods. So this is the morning after, where we're going around and saying, Zach, what did you hear at your table? And he was writing it on the map. And so this is where, after doing all of that, we kind of heard these eight kind of design areas that we needed to work on. So then we sent out to document and design. Here's your design team. This is Rabia that you'll meet later, and Dr. Linda Nubani, who you'll interact with this week or next week. Let's see, interior design. I'm not sure which are interior. They're all landscape, no interior design. Zach was an urban planning student. Elena was the student from criminal justice. Harmony was the local planner. Oh, they were all master students, weren't they? Master, yeah. But some had backgrounds in interior design undergrad, I think. And so on the left-hand side here, you have Harmony digitizing all of the data that we received from that visual preference survey. On the right-hand side, you have some of our design team. Woman on the right is Christy Kellum, who I was talking a little bit about, did the research in the 360 lab. So that was day 1. We had the public presentation. This is day 2, where we're designing. Also in day 2, we had 2 or 3 different stakeholder meetings set up. One that was around safety, where we were able to talk with local police, and here we have what we call neighborhood watches. So this is neighborhoods work together to just keep an eye on things. They'll report to the police, and oftentimes attend city meetings with the police so that everybody knows what's going on in the neighborhood. So this is a neighborhood watch captain, one of the residents sitting alongside the designers and the police, talking about the designs that we were thinking about and asking questions about them. The other piece, the other topic that we were talking about, I think this one is transportation. This is the head of the Department of Transportation in Lansing, Andy. And you have several members there who are talking about bus routes. They're talking about sidewalks. And they're talking about pedestrian safety. So we were getting kind of input from those two different pieces. So that was day 2. At the end of day 2, we had a public meeting or an open house where we had these stations set up all around the room. And we had a designer at each of the stations. Actually, I think that, I don't know if that is Rabia, but a designer at each of the different stations with a design that they had developed. And what they were doing is we had groups of people, I think groups of 3 people rotating after 5 or 10 minutes to each stations to learn from the designer their design, why they designed it, what are the elements that went into that, And then that designer would ask for feedback from those participants, from those 3 participants. After 10 minutes, those participants rotated to the next one, and the same process happened again. And so we got some, and then Harmony would digitize all of this. And so this is an example of the feedback that we got. So this was actually, Rabia was in charge of this design, and this is a school. And so she put in, you know, we're thinking about glass panels. We're putting in murals on the outside of the walls. We're doing bright colored entrances. We heard from the community that they wanted a kitchen, a gym, there's a pool, there's a welcome center, kind of using this more as a community center with a cafe, an office space, a business incubator, a music room. Those were all ideas that came out of the very first night in the vision. She would talk about she put in some boulders along the walkway and window flower plants. And so then what we heard based on this design were things that they liked about it and things that they would change about it. And so then Rabia could go back and the next day and take this feedback and make changes to her design. And so this is just the slide showing you who is in charge of which sections and which designs. Linda and Dina is an alumni of the interior design program. And so they would float between all of the different stations and all of the students and give them some direction. In some cases, the circulation and trail, Zach is an urban planning student, and so he did not come with design experience. So he was working with Alex to kind of conceptualize some of those things. So that's why there were 2 people on that one. But oops, I'm sorry, back one. So this is, let me double check to see. What I'm going to show you is, so these were the overall themes and the products during the charrette. I have examples for each one. So this is the overall plan view. This overall plan view, they had to work with all of the different stations and all of the different other themes to be able to support the overall plan view. And these were the things that we heard, remember, from that first night that I had mentioned, all incorporated into the overall plan and showing how they connected to each other. We reported back, here's the things that we heard underneath those kind of broad categories and things that we tried to incorporate into the design for the overall plan. I will note here, it says, we did ask, we have student, I think we went to a school and we did this exercise with a bunch of students and asked them how they would like to get to school in a safe way. And they said they would like to zip line to school. Are you familiar with a zip line where you hang and zip? So you'll always get very interesting feedback when you talk to students. It's highly entertaining and highly refreshing. Maybe dangerous, I'm not sure, but always interesting. So then under circulation and trail systems, here's where we put up the side-by-side with the existing scenario along with what it could be to help people think differently. This is the American Strip Mall. If you're familiar with that development, you'll see it everywhere here. And this is just the bigger version there and what was proposed. So we had, I believe that Linda worked with all of the students to make sure that they had the pictures and the images pre-programmed so that they didn't have to waste charrette time to do that. So they could quickly pull together some designs. Again, this is a street section in neighborhood. existing along this hand side, and then a proposed bus stop on the right. Again, with lighting, all incorporating SEPTED principles where bushes, I think, need to be, help me here, expert, greater than 2 feet, but not greater than 8, along with lighting, or somewhere in that range anyway. Here is the proposed trail design, overhead pedestrian bridge. And here is the intersection design. So this intersection was really overbuilt for the amount of traffic that's on it. And it's really limiting for non-vehicular traffic to get across and mobility. And so kind of give you a sense for, this is a single store, like a convenience store. This is the school that you saw the design for earlier. And I think the strip mall is either here or here. I can't remember which one. And here's the design of taking out the intersection and putting in a roundabout, showing how it would function and how pedestrians would interact with it. And then some improvements to that intersection at the store. And showing an example of what could be. Okay, this is the residential street cross section. On the left-hand side, existing, right-hand side, potential. There's existing conditions. And this is pointing out not SEPTED-like characteristics, and then proposed designs. I also did some branding based on for signage. And then Logan Square, this is the other strip mall that currently has this configuration. And this is the proposed design looking like that, with some food access included, food truck, food access. That was one of the things that they heard. This is the park, proposed amenities with some stage, stadium seating, and kind of really allowing some opportunity for some programming. And you'll notice the connection to the trail there too. Really, this might show up on the next slide. The park is completely undeveloped and overgrown. There's nothing happening there except for, I think, maybe a swing set. So this was, that's the park that abuts the school. And then this is the design for the school, showing a daytime version, showing a nighttime version. And one of the things that we did, because this was an applied research project, we did evaluation at each of our engagements. So we had 3 public meetings. So we had an overall evaluation at each of those. But after every activity that we did, we also had an evaluation. My caution to that is that people get tired of filling out surveys or answering stuff. But it did supply us with some valuable information. And what we were asking wasn't, I don't think it was onerous. It was, do you feel like your voice was heard? Did something that we talked about today make you change your mind or question something that you had previously not thought about? And so what we learned is that participants thought that all of the activities were meaningful. The one-word activities at the very beginning, where we created the word cloud about what one word defined your community and what you hoped it would be, those were at least meaningful. You'll see here that participants did feel that they were welcomed to share their ideas, and they did feel heard throughout them. And for every exercise on every day, a very good portion, between 80 to 95% of respondents felt that the exercise changed their point of view, which wasn't necessarily our intent. We were just kind of curious about that. and that they thought it was an important step in turning ideas into action. So, so these are our numbers here. We had a total of 24 the first day, 36, and then 47 at the end. So sometimes you'll see in the charrette process, a few things happen. It either builds towards increased participation, or sometimes it wanes and does the opposite, where you have the most at the first one. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the charrette wasn't successful. It could be an indication of people came on the first night, thought they were heard, and went, I'm good, I'm okay, I trust them with what they're going to do. So with a total of 107 people participating. After we did the charrette, it was important for us to sit down and think about what we would have done differently and what the limitations of the charrette were. And so, so here are our thoughts related to that. So kind of 4 key points related to the limitations of the charrette. We did not have a lot of diversity participating in that. There were lots of organizations represented, but there weren't a lot of just regular residents and citizens participating. And that was a result of too little and too late outreach, also hindered by holidays and weather. So there were some things that we thought went into some of those things. And we also didn't have time, we talked about in the charrette process, at the end of a longer charrette, you have this opportunity to start vetting and putting together the feasibility of your plan. We did not have that in this charrette. And so that was driving the last limitation. And then what we would do different on the right-hand side. We didn't do a lot of talking with community members in the preparation, because this was, there wasn't a lot of preparation involved. So should we go back to do that again, we would definitely want to do focus groups in advance of the charrette. We would want to do interviews with residents. That would also help to drive participation in the charrette itself. Yeah, I think some other thing, we would make it longer, do 4 days to be able to accomplish some greater detail and also to check feasibility. And yeah, so what we did do, we as a charrette team went through and evaluated our process, and then came up with some proposed action steps and next steps that we gave to the city. So ideally, these would have come out of the charrette process. We didn't have time to do that. So we put them together and then gave them to the city, noting that these did not receive stakeholder input. So very clear there. So that was some general thoughts, some ideas around programming, and kind of for each of the components that we talked about. Non-motorized connectivity, that intersection, and both placemaking and SEPTED strategies there. And then at the end of the presentation, we always tell them where we're headed and what's next. And so that's just the slide saying that we were going to work on that plan for implementation, which you just saw, and develop some action steps. So that is the end of this presentation, and I would be very happy to answer any questions that you have about that. Do you guys have any questions? And I can go back to any slides that you're interested in.
Yeah, I actually have a question. When you said regarding when you give them the red sticker and the green sticker one, so there was a disconnect between what Ma'am Linda already had data on her hand and what participant says. So how do you analyze that? Like there's a disconnect, the gap between, because there's a data that is saying these are the crime areas, and the participants are saying we are not actually afraid to be in that area. So there's an error, right, in research, or
There's just a disconnect between perception of crime and real crime data. Some of it can be explained by not all crime is reported. So Linda had to go back and I'll answer your question, I think, in a few different ways, and hopefully I'll get to what you were looking for. Linda had to go back and look at and have some more conversations about how residents report crime. Do they report? Is it underreported? And so some of that was driven by the community members not having strong relationships with the police, that they didn't trust if they called 911 that someone would actually come. So they found that actually a lot of crime was underreported in that community. So that then she could say, hey, City of Lansing Police Department, this may be happening and people are afraid to tell you about it, but it's still happening. And so it's just, it provided an opportunity for more conversation to understand what was causing the disconnect. The other piece that I wanted to share related to that was that then helped to drive the places that we focused our designs on. So we may have gone into the charrette saying, we're gonna do designs here, here, and here. But what we would have done is we would have alienated our residents because they were saying, we need designs here, here, and here. So there was, I think, a little bit of massaging and negotiating among the Charrette team about where to do the designs, that we needed to do a blend of both. And so that's why we ended up with 8 different designs, but we had the capacity to do that. But, you know, that may have been, maybe we do 1 research hotspot and we do 2 resident focused hotspots. Hello, hello. So good to see you in person.
Yeah, finally.
Yeah. So that would be the 2 ways that I would answer that question. And I hope that one of those was helpful.
Okay, so let me wrap up this presentation, and I hope you guys enjoy this case study about design charrette. And if you have more questions, please let me know. Thank you.